Welcome back to Undoing I Do with Stephanie Ade. I'm Stephanie Hunnell, the owner of the Hunnell Law Group in Asbury Park, New Jersey, and your co-host for this evening.
Oh my gosh, I missed you saying that. And I am Adela LaCharlene Dow. The law offices of Adela LaCharlene Dow is the name of my practice on Staten Island. And I am also your co-host for this evening. Welcome back.
Welcome back. I've missed you.
I missed you too. And what people have to understand is that Steph and I will send a text and this, that, the other. We'll send an email randomly. But we don't talk as much as we do when we don't have the show on, even though we keep up with each other. So yeah, we're in groups together. So I kind of sort of know what's going on.
Reaching halt.
But welcome back to the second season. We are going to be talking about to vax or not vax your kids.
Yeah.
Woosa.
A little bit political and a little bit of a hot topic. And we have a special guest tonight to help us get through the science and data of it all.
Yes, my special guest has been my friend since we were 7, or I was 7 because I'm a little bit older than her. I'm not going to tell her age or anything, but I'm a little bit older than her. And so I was 7 and our parents have been friends for over 30 years. Registered nurse Mari Bailey Bellarmino. I knew her back in the day when it was Bailey. She is a registered nurse and a former NYPD police officer as well.
Many hats.
You do wear a lot of hats.
She has 5 million hats.
Albums out.
Mm-hmm. And she has 3 albums now. You just released a new track recently.
Yeah.
So if anybody wants to hear about her music, Mari Bells, right?
Yep. BLLZ. Okay, that's enough.
Look her up on Spotify. But she is here tonight, not as an artist.
B as in boy, ELLZ as in zebra.
Yes. And she's here tonight, not as an artist, although her music is amazing, but as the lead vaccination nurse at Beacon.
Yep.
Tell us about your qualifications, Mari.
So, quick journey. After an 8-year career in the NYPD, I decided that was enough. That was not my preferred form of helping people. So I went to nursing school, graduated. For a while, I worked at the Damien Healthcare Centers in the Bronx as a federally qualified healthcare center. I was the pediatric nurse, so that's where I learned about the shots. And I was giving shots, and I enrolled them in what's called the Vaccines for Kids program. So, and then I decided the commute was way too much. And after a stint in the nursing home, I'm at the Beacon Christian Healthcare Center, where I have kind of made my own role. I started as the Vaccine for Adults coordinator, and now I'm just the shot girl.
The shot girl. Not shot.
No. Shot. I got your flu. I'm like Oprah Winfrey of vaccines. You got a flu. When you got a flu.
So I told Stephanie when we started talking about this topic that I have always been on the fence about vaccinating my kids. Everybody who watches this know I have 2 little kids. One of them is 8. One of them is a little 2-year-old terror person. And but I have always been on the fence about the vaccine, period. And I was that person that was like, okay, I'm gonna wait to see who takes a shot. And if y'all are alive at the end of a few months, then all right, okay, I'll be on board. But when it comes to my kids, I'm just a little bit concerned about whether, and I have an 8-year-old, so she's in that right. She's right in the middle of the kids who are eligible to be vaccinated. And I'm sure if I asked her, she would say, yeah, I want to be vaccinated because I'm about that life. I want to be out and doing bopping and that's my kid.
She wants to show her little CDC card.
Right. She'll be like, I'm here. I can get in. But as a mom first, right? Because Mari has a son. Mm-hmm. As a mom first, what was your initial thought process about whether your son was going to get vaccinated?
my son's a little older. He's 12. So they got back in July when it got approved. June, excuse me. My son turns 12 in July. Back when it got approved, I said I had to sit with myself, and I'm like, am I going to take him to get the vaccine? Am I going to ask him if he wants it, or am I just not going to do it? I felt like I was vaccinated, my mom was vaccinated, 2 out of 3 ain't bad. And he wasn't going anywhere because of remote learning, and I was still on the fence on whether remote learning was going to continue or not. I thought, I'm surprised they went back to school on time, to be honest.
I am too.
But I digress. So before I could even come to an answer, my son came to me like, Mom, I'm turning 12. When am I getting my vaccine? And I said, okay, well, I guess. And I don't come home and talk about work that much with my son. Like, he knows I'm a nurse. He knows I give vaccines, but I'm not like, hey, son. But he came to me and said, I want the vaccine. Why wouldn't I? He actually, in school, he wrote a paper about vaccines that I just happened to have to sneak behind his back and read. And it was very pro-vaccine. And I'm like, he didn't get that from me. So, but that was my thought process. I was on the fence too.
Why? Why were you on the fence?
Even though I know it has been disproven, there was a theory that the mRNA vaccines, the spike protein they code for, might be similar to proteins in the placenta and might affect infertility. That's been disproven. But in the back of my head, there's this little nagging voice that says, but that's just my mental process.
It's the mommy voice. That's what that is. It's the mommy voice.
It was the mommy voice. Like, are we sure we need grandkids?
Right. Right. So, he's 12, people. He's 12.
And what's funny is that I'm a nurse and I read the studies and I had to educate myself so that I could be able to tell my patients the correct information. And I still had that nagging feeling because the misinformation got in my head before the truth did.
Stephanie, that happens to all of us. It's just a part of regular life, just part of being a human being, no?
Yeah, it is. And so I evaluated that, and then, but my son coming to me and wanting it made me feel a lot better about it. You know what I mean? At least it wasn't me making the decision for him. He made the decision himself based on, he was looking it up on YouTube. Like, he was finding the good sources.
So I jump in because I don't have kids. And I got vaccinated. My husband and I we were immediately, the second we were allowed to get vaccinated, we got vaccinated. We didn't have a second thought about it. But I have 30 nieces and nephews. So I was texting a bunch of them. I was texting my siblings and my older nieces that have younger kids to find out what their opinions were. And I wanted some information. And one of the things that stood out to me is my sister was saying that the research seems like it's hidden. So she wasn't comfortable even considering it for her kids when she feels like the research is hidden from her and she's not able to make an informed decision. So what she's finding is like piecemeal. And, some of the other ones were saying the same thing. They were saying, everybody's worried, everybody's considering it, everybody's thinking about it, but they're all very concerned that they don't really know what the impact is going to be on little children. And everything that they're finding is just bits and pieces here and there. Is there one local place where we can get, or one website where we can go to get solid information?
In a website. So the New York City does have a COVID-19 vaccination website. I'm sorry, the actual web address escapes me. But if you go to nyc.gov and search COVID vaccine, you'll find it. Mm-hmm. That's a pretty decent starting point. It doesn't really have studies, but it does have a lot of information about, what are the different types of vaccines? Do the vaccines have the virus in it? The basic questions that for some reason I don't really hear a lot either. Mm-hmm. Like, a lot of people are surprised when I say there's no virus in this vaccine. Because they're thinking half of them think there's microchips, which I've seen the vials. I can assure you there's no microchips. You're not going to turn magnetic, and my 5G still sucks. So, but I hear more of that, the misinformation. It's not necessarily that people, from my personal experience, I'm not finding that people can't find the correct information. It's just they're looking for something to tell them what they already believe.
Mm-hmm.
So, but to get back to your point, nyc.gov, and then search COVID-19 vaccines, and then the CDC itself, it does link you to some of the studies, and it does explain the side effects and how they're monitoring the safety of the vaccine, and the what's called the VAERS system, the vaccine VAERS is basically how they track vaccine accidents now. But you have to remember, on that site, if somebody gets a vaccine, walks out the hospital or walks out the doctor's office and gets hit by a bus, that's still considered a vaccine incident.
Really?
Yes.
Oh.
Yes.
Why? Well, if you know why.
Just because the element of, you never know, maybe the person was so distraught about getting a vaccine that they weren't looking, and that's why they got hit by the bus. Yeah, that it's a tenuous at best.
Speechless about that.
That's crazy. I don't even understand. But yes, when you talk about New York City's vaccine website, you literally have to go to one.nyc.gov and then search. And when you look at New York City websites, anything that's linked with NYC is always based off of nyc.gov. But if you search it, as Mari said in the search handle here, you will find, I don't know, I don't think I can share it, but you will find a whole bunch of information on that website. But what is it that,
Yeah, I have.
what is it that you think people should look for in terms of just calming their fears about whether this vaccine is safe for children? And what have you read that calmed your concern as to your son?
When I learned, well, I'm going to be 100% honest and a little political. When I learned that the vaccine was actually spearheaded by a Black woman, that made me feel a lot more at ease. Because I know about the Tuskegee experiments and stuff like that. So
I'll tell you that's interesting, because a lot of minority people are the laggers here in terms of getting vaccinated, period.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So a lot of people would understand exactly what you mean. And I think a lot of women too, irrespective of the fact that this person is a Black woman, would feel a lot more secure because it's a woman who spearheaded.
But in terms of feeling okay for myself, and then of course later on my son when he came to me, is when I found out how the vaccine works.
Which is how? Because I still don't know how the vaccine works.
All right. Ooh, I get to do my spiel. All right. Okay. So you know DNA, right?
Yes.
Okay. So when your body wants to tell your cells to make a protein, the DNA makes something called mRNA. The M stands for messenger. So the messenger RNA travels out the nucleus of the cell into the main part of the cell, where there's something called ribosomes, which are these little cute little pearls, and they pick up amino acids and they string them together and fold the protein. And the messenger RNA, as soon as that's done, it goes poof and disappears. So the cell is very familiar with destroying messenger RNA after the job is done. Keep this in mind for later. So what this vaccine does is it doesn't use clarification. The Moderna and the Pfizer are mRNA vaccines. Mm-hmm. The Johnson & Johnson is a virus vector vaccine. I'll explain that later. We'll focus on the mRNA. So the mRNA in this vaccine codes for the spike protein I mentioned earlier. So it's a tiny piece of the virus, but it cannot infect you. And it cannot replicate itself. It has to be made by the ribosome. Now, it's a small enough piece that it doesn't really cause the disease itself because it's not the whole virus. And your body made it out of the pieces, the amino acids it had laying around.
Oh, so when you say that when you say the vaccine doesn't have virus in it, that's what you mean.
That's what I mean. It has messenger RNA in it. The messenger RNA goes into your muscle cells. The muscle cells learn how to make the spike protein, and then the messenger RNA goes, okay, I'm done. I'm going on vacation. So the spike protein is made by your own body, but it looks like the virus. So that's how it teaches the body to recognize the spike protein on the actual virus. And that's how you start making the antibodies. Now, common misconceptions, the messenger RNA does not go into your nucleus. That's not how our messenger RNA works. That's not how it never enters the nucleus. Your DNA is not changed or affected. And
because that's a common misconception, right, Steph? That people really thought that their DNA was being somehow manipulated.
Right, no, which is what I want to go back to. Right, so it doesn't enter the nucleus, and the importance of not entering the nucleus is what?
Is that's where the DNA is stored, right, and does its thing. That's the brain, the architecture center of the cell is the nucleus. And so that messenger RNA, that's why it's called messenger RNA, because it's a message from the DNA to the rest of the cell. So what we're doing, and then as soon as it's done assembling the protein, the cell breaks it down. So it never exits your cells. And that's part of the reason why I like it. I know all the side effects are from our body reacting to the vaccine. It's not and producing the antibodies. It's not from the messenger RNA. The messenger RNA never leaves the cell. So it doesn't actually circulate in your body. What circulates in your body is the stuff your body is producing.
Interesting. That's really interesting.
You just took me back to what was that?
Biology,
biochemistry, or biology, or whatever I took in high school.
I was just picturing the little pictures of the DNA where they're like.
I was picturing the what is it? What's the R one? Rhizomes.
Ribosome.
Okay.
The little
pearls. Rhizomes are what you plant in the garden. Okay, yeah, go ahead.
And so those two things that I mentioned, the fact that it doesn't actually enter the nucleus, the fact that it's not the virus itself, that the protein is produced by my own body, and the messenger RNA doesn't go to other parts of the body where it could affect, say, fertility, made me feel a lot more comfortable. And that's why I felt silly when I had that nagging suspicion in the back of my head, because guess what? I already knew that it doesn't work that way.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. And it's interesting because so many people. Oh, go ahead, Steph.
No, I just said nobody explains. I mean, it's complicated and nobody really explains it in this way. And we have our inherent fears for whatever reasons. I know the minority population for very specific reasons. But if it was explained in that way, that it's really our own body's proteins that are converting, and we're not really, even though we're putting this messenger RNA in our body, it's not actually impacting, and it's not like a foreign body being put into our bloodstream, into our muscles, into our DNA.
Right. Yeah. Nobody explains that to you. And what's, and it actually changes my thought process, because I was like, we just will be team mask all day for these little kids. We will be team mask all day. I was trying to figure out how I was going to tell the school system that, not my kids. Because people have these thought processes, especially with respect to, I have a very strong thought process about the Gardasil vaccine, for instance, right? And the studies I've read behind that. But I think I was ascribing some of my concern about that vaccine to this vaccine, not understanding how the vaccine works. And I think that as matrimonial lawyers, we haven't started to get the telephone calls yet, but I know they're coming because this all just went down within a matter of days, right? So I haven't started to get the calls yet, and it's not my job to convince my client either or.
Right.
But when you do understand the science behind it, you can better educate your clients. Now, we are not scientists. We are not here to give medical advice. Neither is Mari. We're not even here to give legal advice. We're here to talk about concepts and misconceptions.
Mm-hmm. And understanding such a difficult topic, and with the field that we're in with matrimonial law and divorce in particular with custody, two people have difference of opinion, and you have to co-parent, and you have to figure out who gets to make that decision. What if one parent says, yes, they're gung-ho on vaccinating their child, and the other parent is like, absolutely not? The courts are going to have a difficult time. And I don't know, it doesn't sound like there's a right or wrong answer. I can understand the science, and it sounds to me like it's safe. But I also can understand the concerns when you're talking about your child. I actually looked at the CDC website, and from 0 to 4, there have been 206 deaths related to COVID. And from 5 to 18, 474 deaths related to COVID. So it's starting to impact children. When you're talking about the whole US, that might not seem like a big number. But when you're talking about people's children, that's
correct.
Huge number.
When it's your child and it's just one child,
yep,
it's a huge number.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And people often say, oh, it's only X, Y, Z. It's not even a percent. Okay, yeah, but tell that to those people who lost their kid.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, what people often struggle to understand about the justice system is that the justice system doesn't have answers to everything. And this is going to be one of those things that, judges are not qualified to tell you what to do with your child health-wise, period. But certainly, there's some things that are common sense. Okay, Timmy needs a blood transfusion, and one parent thinks X because they have this belief, and the other parent thinks Y, and so now we're going to rush into court. First of all, I don't even know if the judge is going to get to Timmy's case in time enough to figure out, especially if he needs this blood transfusion urgently. But you have to understand that judges are people too, and sometimes they're just as conflicted, and sometimes they act out of bias thinking that it's the best thing for them to do. And you don't want to, Steph and I say this all the time, you just don't want to have this kind of situation before a judge to decide. You really want to try to flesh out with your doctors, care providers, what to do without getting a man or a woman or, they in a row.
Yep. I think the best thing to do is for both parents to go with each other to the doctor or the provider, whoever they're going to go and see about this issue, and have a discussion about it and come to some conclusion. You have to come to a conclusion. Politics, we don't always talk about politics, but this is a very politicized issue. It has been, the last few years because of just the way the Republicans and Democrats have been. So it's very politicized, unfortunately. And that doesn't necessarily leave a judge's mind when they're making their decision regarding what they think is the right answer for your family. If you can put that aside, then you're already doing.
That's especially so when judges are appointed as they are in the state of New Jersey. Mm-hmm. In the state of New York, judges are elected. And obviously, we just had our election the other day. Okay, yeah, I won't go there more. We just had our election the other day here on Staten Island. And there were no surprises that resulted from the election. But our judges are elected, and they're elected for many years at a time, and will probably be less impacted, especially if they're younger in tenure. They'll probably be less impacted by the political sense of, the constituents, but maybe not so much when it comes to judges who are appointed. Mm-hmm. And so you really want to think about this as a mom and a co-parent, Mari. How did you deal with the question of whether your son was going to be vaccinated? And if I ask you too much, just say I don't feel comfortable answering that.
I feel very comfortable answering because the situation at least. I am not the model for how to handle it. I did not speak to my co-parent at all about it. I'm pretty sure, but after the fact, he said, yeah, I'm glad he got the vaccine, because my co-parent comes from a family of medical professionals, so
Yeah.
that wasn't something that I knew he'd agree anyway. So
Mhm.
I'm not going to discuss it.
Yeah. I
Don't
feel
do
like
that. Discuss it.
discuss it. Yeah, don't do that. Bad,
know what?
Mark. Don't do that.
At the beginning of COVID, I found a lot of my clients began talking more because they had to make arrangements for what happens if somebody's exposed, how are we going to quarantine? And I was very pleasantly surprised that a lot of my clients were able to start working together more. I'm seeing the shift already changing though.
I know.
Now that we're like at the tail end.
Yeah, I see it too. You know, you didn't marry or have a child with your twin.
Mhm.
You're going to have, there's going to be some kind of disconnect. Sometimes there's going to be some kind of conflict. Even if the person were your twin, there's going to be some kind of differences. But yeah, speaking about the difference and consulting with an attorney, look, sit down. You don't have to run into court immediately because of this. Sit down with an attorney, even if you're not actively in a case, and discuss what your options are. But when you're going to get to a point though where even if you are both on the same page with this, I think that it will be that these vaccines will be mandated in both New York and New Jersey. I believe that's on the pike, down the pike. I think that's going to happen. And so you even may need to be on the same page with how you're going to deal with your school. If you are the couple that says, you know what, the co-parents who say, you know what, this is not for our kids, that's another issue that you're going to have to deal with. And perhaps you wouldn't be consulting with attorneys like Stephanie and I, but you'd be consulting with education attorneys at that point.
Yeah. I know that's coming in California, the mandate.
Yeah.
Can I just express a little bit of frustration and bewilderment because the flu vaccine still isn't mandated. And the flu vaccine, before COVID, it was, we were begging people to get the flu vaccine. Oh, side note, flu vaccine is usually about 40% effective, but the Moderna and Pfizer vaccines are in the 90s. That is really high for a vaccine. Okay, I'm done with the spiel. But so I'm wondering why New York feels the need to mandate it like that. I understand for the healthcare workers and adults because sometimes you got to hit, but I don't understand why they're mandating this particular vaccine for the children and they don't mandate the flu for the children. It doesn't make sense to me.
You know, that's interesting because I didn't realize that the flu vaccine wasn't mandated in this. Is it mandated in the city and not for the state?
It's not mandated in the city. You can go. You can have your child in New York City public schools without having a flu shot. You want to know how I know? Because I have a colleague who's working and he's calling people from our CIR list who haven't gotten the flu vaccine. And there's a lot of vaccines where if you tell them, oh, it's mandated for school, they'll get it. What flu? There's they don't need it for school. Click. They don't need it for school. Click. They don't need it for school. Click. They don't need it for school. So it is actually, you can go. So that's why I'm a little befuddled and bemused.
But is it because COVID is more communicable? I don't know. I'm just saying. I don't know whether that's true or not.
I mean, we've had coronaviruses before.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Some of the common colds, some of them are adenoviruses and some of them are coronaviruses. This particular bunch of strains, because now it's done mutated, is more virulent than the flu. But the flu and the cold were kind of virulent, meaning communicable. Like you said.
Right. Easily. Right. Mm-hmm.
And like I said, it's the same people who are at a higher risk for complications for the flu are at a higher risk for complications from COVID. So and that's why I don't understand why this one's mandated and the flu is not, because H1N1 in 2009,
right?
Yeah. That was a very virulent strain of flu.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And kids are not in that vulnerable population either, correct?
No.
Right.
Most children, right?
Most children. As you pointed out with the numbers, even though when it's your child is a huge number, there's much smaller numbers compared to the millions of adults who've contracted COVID. And
Yeah.
he passed away.
I mean, why is that? Is it because my immunities are still in my little yayam and he's just so precious, and I'm fighting for him? Or and what is it? What is it that makes
I honestly do
more
not
susceptible
have.
to dying?
I do not have an answer. That's something that will come from long-term studies. There is a chance, some viruses, kids get them, they're fine. Adults get them, they're really sick, like chickenpox.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Or the converse, where kids get it and it's terrible, adults get it and it's not so bad.
Right.
So it might just be one of those things where, for whatever reason, either because we kept the precious kids home and did the right thing, like we were supposed to, they were quarantined and stayed put for a whole year. That might have helped. Or maybe they're just less susceptible. Maybe it just affects children different than adults. Mm-hmm. But because there is still a vulnerable subset of children, we still have to protect them.
Right.
But how to protect them is we're herd immunity. We didn't reach it. So now we got to think about something else.
And the numbers are the numbers still coming down?
Yes.
So that's a good thing. I wonder though, I mean, Mari and I both serve Staten Island, and Staten Island has made the news with respect to people not wanting to be vaccinated. Mm-hmm. I don't think anybody, somebody has gotten beaten up. Yes, somebody has. There's been lawsuits all over the place, about accessing restaurants and this, that, and the other. I really actually don't have an opinion on that stuff, but it's definitely a population that is much more divergent in their beliefs as to what should be done. It's very clear on Staten Island that there's a segment of people who think X, and there's a segment of people who think Y, and never the two really meet. So it's definitely
the dividing line.
Yeah, it's definitely hot button here, and it actually goes down. It's a party line hot button issue.
So I was in Hawaii recently visiting family, and in Hawaii, you're required to carry your vaccination card and show your driver's license. So if you were going into any restaurant, bar, you have to show it. You have to wear masks or all mandated. And when you show your card, you get a little stamp, and then you have to take your name and telephone number and address if you're local, so that way they can actually contact trace you. They very vigilant about it. Everywhere you go, you're wearing a mask. If you walk into any kind of a store, they don't contact trace you for a regular shopping experience, but you do have to wear a mask. And the inconvenience was so insignificant to do that. I mean, and their numbers are really, really low. And then coming back home to New Jersey, no one has a mask anywhere. It's very strange to see, because the inconvenience was so insignificant. It took an extra couple minutes to check into a restaurant.
Yeah, it's interesting because in New York, you now have to have a vaccination to go to a restaurant, movie theaters, right? And gyms. Yeah. So if you're going to go out to lunch, you're about to take takeout right now, because you're not able to sit in the restaurant. And it's Brick City out here. It's Brick City in New York now.
Or my favorite is, there's a lot of restaurants, particularly in Staten Island, who just said we're not going to follow it.
Yes.
They go out of their way not to follow it. Like, if you have it, we don't need to see your freedom papers. Like, it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
And that's really offensive, though.
Yeah, it is.
It's so offensive when you think about where that freedom papers reference comes from. That is so offensive.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm good with everybody having whatever their opinion is. I care very little about what somebody's opinion is. I care more about if they don't have an opinion. Exactly. I actually care more about that than if they do, right? But to say things like that is offensive. And I think that there was a restaurant recently where the owner actually kicked people who had masks on out of his restaurant
Mhm.
because they had on masks.
Really?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, look, there is no right or wrong in this debate, but there is something to just being responsible.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes we just have to sometimes we have to take a course that's different than what we thought we were going to take for the simple sake of being responsible and protecting other human beings.
Yeah, on top of just being responsible, I think you should just be a good human being
Mm-hmm.
and care about your fellow man. And if we all just did that a little bit and treated other people like we want to be treated, then perhaps we wouldn't have as many fights and people getting beat up for wearing a mask or not wearing a mask.
Yeah, that even happened in New York. That actually, did you hear about the New York City cop situation where there was a gentleman riding on the train in New York City and two police officers got onto the train and they weren't masked. And so the gentleman said, asked them to put on their masks, and apparently he got shoved out of the train and all kinds of, yeah, it's those type of things are just not acceptable. I mean, look, I don't always like what I have to do in terms of enforcing what the law is. Sometimes I think, that certain things are not right or not fair, or they just don't vibe with my own personal philosophy. But as an officer of the court, this is what I'm obligated to do.
Right.
And so, and I'm obligated to do that in a way that keeps decorum, and that doesn't bring shame to my profession. It's my thought process on it, But this has been a great episode. Mari, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, we're so happy you came on, especially for our first episode.
And at the last minute too, she actually said, "Hey, by the way, do you want me to? Do you need an ex? Do you need? I'm the shot lady. Do you need me to be on there?" So thank you for extending your own invitation.
You're welcome. That's right. I create my rooms.
And don't forget to check out Mari Bells on Spotify.
My alter ego.
Yeah, don't forget. What's the name? Your latest song is "Hey Girl."
Yeah.
Yeah, everybody needs to listen to this song and watch the video. And again, domestic violence awareness is not just a month. Domestic violence awareness is a state of being. If you know anybody who needs help, make sure that you reach out to them. They are probably in the loneliest place that they've ever been in their lives. And I'm sure that a helping hand is always welcome. Thanks for watching.
Have a great night. See you next week.